You're listening to Audiology. Support our work on Patreon and be sure to submit your requests for topics in the comments below. In the past, many European settlers viewed Native Americans with prejudice, labeling them as savages. Yet the interactions between them and the indigenous peoples varied, especially when comparing the French and British colonies. In the Great Lakes region, New France aimed to build a cooperative relationship with Native Americans. This approach included marriages between French traders, known as runners of the woods, and native women, in a tradition called marriage in the manner of the country. Such marriages played a key role in connecting the two cultures socially and politically. Additionally, many missionaries took it upon themselves to teach native tribes useful skills, like working with iron tools, constructing homes in the European style, and enhancing their farming methods. These skills, shared first with the Huron tribe, who enjoyed a century-long friendship with the French Canadians, were later passed to other tribes as the Huron moved to the Maumee Valley. During the 17th and 18th centuries, amidst conflicts such as the Beaver Wars and the French and Indian Wars, most of the powerful tribes sided with the French. However, some, like the Iroquois, allied with the English for strategic reasons. The French also strategically placed forts and trading posts within native villages to foster economic and military alliances, as seen with Fort Miami in Indiana. Despite these cooperative efforts, a belief in cultural and racial superiority by Europeans, particularly among colonial officials and clergymen, remained prevalent. In the era of American colonization, the English colonists particularly believed in their civilization's superiority, rooted in Christianity and their understanding of land ownership. This belief led to a push for cultural assimilation among the tribes, including the Cherokee, a process championed by George Washington. By the 19th century, tribes like the Cherokee and the Choctaw were encouraged and in some cases forced to adopt European customs. This included converting to Christianity, learning English, adopting European values like monogamous marriage, and the individual ownership of land and property, which for some tribes included owning African slaves. Notably, many Cherokee, including influential figures like Chief John Ross, John Ridge, and Elias Boudinot, who edited the Cherokee Phoenix, embraced these changes, adopting European practices and lifestyles to various extents. Even though many Native Americans and tribes had started to adopt white cultural values, the United States government, led by Andrew Jackson, pushed for a systematic removal of Native peoples from the Southeast. The Chickasaw, Choctaw, Muskogee Creek, Seminole, and original Cherokee nations were originally autonomous in the southeastern United States. Andrew Jackson was keen on reviving a policy that aimed at the political and military removal of Native Americans from their lands. During his 1829 State of the Union address, he made his intentions for Indian removal clear. The essence of the Indian Removal Act was to take over native lands and then hand them over to southern states, particularly Georgia. This act was passed in 1830, but discussions about such a move had started as far back as 1802 between Georgia and the federal government. According to Ethan Davis, the federal government had assured Georgia it would acquire Indian lands within the state through purchase as soon as such purchase could be made upon reasonable terms. As delays continued, southern states began to pressure for the removal by claiming the deal with the federal government was void and that they could extinguish Indian title on their own. To address this, the federal government enacted the Indian Removal Act on May 28, 1830, with President Jackson's agreement to allocate land west of the Mississippi River for tribes, as a replacement for the lands they were being forced to leave. In the 1823 Supreme Court case of Johnson v. McIntosh, it was decided that Indians could occupy lands within the United States, but couldn't own them. Jackson, who believed in the power of states as was common before the Civil War, disagreed with Washington's policy of treating Indian tribes as sovereign nations through treaties. He saw this as a violation of state sovereignty under the Constitution. Jackson's perspective was that Native Americans should either be considered sovereign states, which he believed violated the Constitution, or be under the laws of existing states. He encouraged Native Americans to assimilate and follow state laws. However, he also thought that if Native Americans wanted to govern themselves, they would need to move to federal territories west of the Mississippi River. The Indian Removal Act had strong support in the South, particularly in Georgia, which was the biggest state in 1802 and was locked in a dispute with the Cherokee over land. President Jackson saw the removal of Native Americans as a solution to what was referred to as the Georgia crisis. However, it wasn't just about the 5 civilized tribes. Other groups impacted included the Wyandot, Kickapoo, Potawatomi, Shawnee, and Lenape. This act stirred a lot of debates across America. While many supported it, there was significant resistance too. For instance, Christian missionaries, with Jeremiah Everts being one of the most vocal, stood firmly against the act. In the political arena, notable figures like Senator Theodore Frelinghuysen from New Jersey, Senator Henry Clay from Kentucky, and Congressman Davy Crockett from Tennessee also expressed their opposition. The battle was fierce in Congress, but the act eventually passed after intense debate, with Henry Clay even making it a key issue in the 1832 presidential election on the National Republican Party's platform. President Jackson defended the removal, arguing that the decline of native nations was unavoidable given the spread of European-influenced lifestyles, and pointing to the earlier decimation of native nations in the Northeast. He labeled his critics in the North as hypocrites, highlighting the North's own history with native nations. Jackson's stance was that progress requires moving forward. Jackson painted a poignant picture of the impact of expanding civilization on native peoples, envisioning progress as inevitable and suggesting that the displacement and disappearance of native tribes made way for the growth of a prosperous and populous republic. He seemed to believe that the transformation from a land of forests inhabited by Native Americans to a developed republic was a form of philanthropic success. Historian H.W. Brands notes that Jackson genuinely thought of the population transfer as a wise and humane policy, aimed at preventing the utter annihilation of Native Americans, framing it as an act of kindness. On a similar note, Robert M. Keaton pointed out that supporters of the bill invoked biblical stories to rationalize the forceful relocation of Native Americans, suggesting that they saw a divine precedent or justification for their actions. On April 24, 1830, the Senate approved the Indian Removal Act by a close margin of 28 votes in favor to 19 against. Just over a month later, on May 26, 1830, the House of Representatives narrowly passed the act, with 101 votes for and 97 against it. President Andrew Jackson then signed the Indian Removal Act into law on May 28, 1830. This act led to the widespread forced removal of tens of thousands of Native Americans from their homelands to territories west of the Mississippi River, an event that has come to be known as the Trail of Tears. This mass displacement is often described as genocide due to its devastating effects on the Native American population. The Treaty of Dancing Rabbit Creek, signed on September 27, 1830, was the first of such treaties, where the Choctaw Nation traded their lands east of the Mississippi River for territory in the west, along with payment. Later, the Treaty of Nouachota, signed in 1835, forcibly removed the Cherokee Nation on the Trail of Tears. Resistance against this forced relocation was strong among some tribes, notably the Seminoles, who, along with escaped slaves, fought back during the Second Seminole War from 1835 to 1842. Despite their resistance, the government eventually confined them to swampland in southern Florida. However, a small number managed to remain, while approximately 3,000 Seminoles were removed during the conflict. Thanks for watching. Share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe for more content.